Welcome back to Out of Home Insider. In case you missed last week's conversation, go back and check that out. It was with Al from Fat Tail. We talked all about direct versus programmatic versus automated ad ops and how your sales strategy can be impacted by all of those variables, but ultimately how you can stitch it together with a solution like Fat Tail. So go back and check that episode out. Looking forward to next week, we'll be meeting with Ed Selhan. He's the CRO of Cookiele. We'll talk about the similarities between print going online, the digitization of out of home, and how digital out of home is becoming more programmatic. And Cookiele in the news last week because they are an omni-channel DSP. Their new panel optimizer, a scoring technology that ranks and rates digital out of home inventory based on a number of factors. Eric, actually, I think you tweeted something about scoring digital out of home inventory a few weeks ago. Maybe we can talk about that. But Cookiele has launched that as part of their DSP. So we'll be talking with Ed next week. And a reminder that there are only 2 weeks left until the Placer AI Discover event on December 10th at Chelsea Pier. If you want to be there, if you haven't yet registered, go to theoohinsider.com. Right across the top, you'll see a big banner with a discount code. That's OOH Insider 70. You'll save 70% on registration. Tickets are wildly reasonable. They're only $3.99, but with that 70% discount, you'll be paying like $120. So go to theoohinsider.com, click that announcement bar at the top there, take advantage of the discount, and we'll see you on December 10th. Now for today's guest. Eric Tilbury, he's a personality on Twitter and LinkedIn and an advocate for digital out of home, which we'll talk about a little bit today. But I think the real objective for us, Eric, is to challenge the status quo. Your mission has been to educate buyers and planners about programmatic. Introduce yourself to the out of home insider universe and maybe give us a little primer about what is so near and dear to your heart.
My mission is to educate buyers and media planners and whoever really has the buying decision on how to look at buying inventory, how to look at performance, and really see what you're doing for your client in a different perspective than what everyone is doing currently. People aren't doing anything that's malicious. They're doing exactly what they were told, what they were taught. And that's really what they're doing on a daily basis. They're sticking to what they know. It's like that old saying, that IBM saying.
No one gets fired for buying IBM?
No one gets fired for buying IBM. So no one gets fired for reporting on user-based attribution within a look-back window.
What do you mean? What do you mean?
CPA,
user-based attribution. What do you mean for the out-of-home audience that's kind of coming online to this conversation? What does that mean in the programmatic universe?
Yeah, so user-based attribution. So the classic view-through setup in programmatic. So you set up your line items, or you have a third-party ad server set up where you have people, different ad tech companies run the budget for you with tags. But at the end of the day, they all have a goal of whoever showed the impression last, whatever line item showed the impression last, gets credit. And that's done based off of an ID match. You serve an impression, that ID drops on where you serve the impression to that user. It follows that user around the web until they finally go to the end, the site. They go and fire the conversion. That conversion looks at the user and goes, who showed this impression last? And you get all the credit. Like, you're great.
So it's like that kid in the class project who didn't do anything, maybe shows up just on the day of the presentation, puts his name on the project. I'm not saying that was ever me, but it sounds a little bit like that. You're getting all the credit and you weren't necessarily there for all the work.
Exactly. So, I mean, technically in that setup, you could sit at the very bottom of the funnel and just show ads to people that would have converted anyways, and you'll win budget.
That does seem like an issue. So how do we solve that?
Yes. So the way to solve that, right, is looking at outcomes and saying how I'm running these ads. I am running these ads, and what is it doing for my actual client's KPI, whatever that KPI would be, whether that's more revenue, whether that's more leads, whether that's in general getting good quality site on their traffic, whatever the KPI on their site, whatever the KPI would be. You have to look at that holistically and say, I'm running all of these channels. These channels have different ways of going about showing users ads. They have different capabilities of tracking users. Some don't track users at all. You have to look at that holistically and see how everything is moving harmoniously in moving that needle in terms of the KPI. When you look at it in terms of an ID match, it favors the channels that could sit there and target IDs all day. There's nothing wrong with looking at that directionally, right? And you understand that, yes, I can target this ID and I can track it. But what do you do about a channel when you're going and targeting someone on their iPhone in Safari. That blocks a lot of what people are trying to do in terms of ID tracking. But Safari is an awesome ecosystem to show ads. A user that has an iPhone is probably pretty qualified to convert. But
Sure.
all of ad tech, the majority of ad tech doesn't even look at that user. They don't see them, they don't recognize them, and then they completely pass on them because they can't attribute it.
It seems, though, like the lack of addressability as we move forward, I think 70% of the open internet will not be addressable by the end of next year. Feels like that starts to level the playing field and maybe forces folks to reconsider. Do you think that would happen? Do you see that playing out?
It's funny. Theoretically, yes.
Sure.
I work with a lot of different brands, a lot of different buyers, a lot of people that control budgets, and none of them are really changing their approach in terms of saying, or even understanding, just the understanding of how to track something that doesn't have an ID.
We're going to send them this
you'll
podcast.
Get someone that comes in. Yeah. You'll get someone that comes in and they'll say, okay, I want you to run ID free targeting. You run ID free targeting. The next question is, what's the CPA? You're like, what? What do you mean, what's the CPA? Your platform track CPA would be 0 if you're doing really ID free targeting. You would have to look at that in terms of an outcome. So that's why outcomes are now they're starting to take shape, and people are starting to pay attention to outcomes because they will tell you how this spend is really correlated to your success. So when you look at it like that, and you get out of the ID way of thinking, then you can expand yourself into channels like digital out of home. And digital out of home is a very unique channel in programmatic, where it is the one channel right now that is one to many. The one to many is it's a great way of advertising, and it's kind of forgot about because everyone's trying to attribute that fucking ID. So when you can open yourself up to other ways of targeting and thinking about measurement and thinking about how you can move the needle for the client, you could get very creative with digital out of home as well.
So it sounds like if we change the way that we think about attribution, if we start with measurement and allow ourselves to be more open-minded, what do you think that those frameworks look like? If we're thinking about this more holistically, measurement first and working backwards, what should that look like?
When you start thinking about measurement, digital out of home is very, very friendly for a measurement like MMM. And there's not one silver bullet solution. And if there was a silver bullet solution that measured outcomes and all of that, everyone would be using it. Everyone would be flocking to it, right? From what I have seen, MMM is very effective in digital and what you can measure with it. But you have to look at it and take that MMM and apply it to what you're doing, how you're buying, and say, okay, there is uncertainty. If you run with a good MMM provider, they'll probably provide you with an R-squared too, which an R-squared is the certainty of the model. So there's always going to be uncertainty, but you take that and you take it directionally, and then you can go apply it everywhere else. And in MMM, the reason why digital out of home is a slam dunk for something like MMM is because digital out of home will give you daily data, will give you hourly data, right, in terms of its spend. And that's friendly with MMM. MMM, where it could miss the mark, right, is where you have, I know that Clear Channel before they couldn't, they provide you, you might know better than me, but they couldn't provide you daily reporting. They would say, this is what you ran, and maybe there's some foot traffic associated to it. So you got to kind of try and normalize it. But programmatic digital out of home is awesome because you can have that very granular level data that you can apply to an MMM where you get a ton of data points. So when you have something like MMM to show to a client, you start to see the light bulbs go off in their head a little bit when I should be thinking about everything. How is everything moving the needle? That's square one, where if you want to run these channels and you want to go into something that doesn't have IDs, you have to start thinking about alternative measurements, and MMM is a great place to start.
One of, I guess, the two knocks against MMM, that it's expensive and that it's not necessarily fast. It's not real time. We've seen some AI platforms that are bringing those costs down and getting a little bit closer to real time and predictive. How do you think about those two factors, given what you just said about MMM?
Yeah. So the speed, when you're dealing with outcomes, and that's the thing, is with attribution, it's very much so I served an impression, user ID attribution and measurement. I served an impression. I tracked that impression within 30 days or whatever your look back window is, 7 days, and you're able to track it. But no one's thinking about what happened to really get that idea in that user's head for a user to make up their mind. Well, not really make up their mind, but put the idea in their head that they need this product, they need this service, they need to check this out. And no one's really thinking of that. And where the thought process of a human is not necessarily like, I see an ad, I need to go and convert immediately. You might get some people that do that, and that's great. All the power to you. Do what you can to get those users. But people need to think about, how am I getting these ideas into these users' head? And that takes time. And that's where I'm completely fine with the speed of something like an MMM. You're going and you're serving these impressions, and you have these spends and you have these tactics, and you're saying over time, these channels are moving the needle for you in terms of driving prospects. And these channels are the ones that are driving instant results. So this is how you should budget going forward.
How do you think about the impressions that you're getting from digital out of home? Is that important to you when you're looking at it from a buying standpoint, from a CPM standpoint, relative, I guess, to the outcomes? How do you think about digital out of home impressions?
Yeah, so a digital out of home impression, what's funny is digital out of home impression, one impression goes a lot further than one impression. So their actual purchase CPMs are pretty cheap. They're like $5, sometimes $10. They could go cheaper than that. So the bang for your buck in digital out of home is pretty good. So each impression you would assume has some kind of multiplier to it. I'm sure digital out of home experts have that number, that they think that there's some kind of multiplier to the CPM. But when you look at pricing, digital out of home pricing and programmatic is comparable to online video. If you're buying online video sound off, it's very comparable. So if you're doing a one-to-many tactic and you could serve a pretty large amount of impressions because it's a lower CPM, why would you not test that? The hardest part that people struggle with is finding the right solutions to target digital out of home. And that's where they get afraid, because they can go and do contextual targeting for online video, or they could do some kind of ID, or a lot of them do ID targeting on online video, where they have a third party data provider, or they do some kind of contextual buy, and then they're going and blasting impressions on online videos like they would with display. And then they stay in their safe space where they can track attribution, and then it's business as usual. Digital out of home is harder. It's a lot harder. And you have to have a solution that's flexible enough to serve the right impression, because you don't want to serve impressions because it's a cool new channel. You want to have some kind of tech behind it where you're serving something that I know is reaching the right type of audience in the right location. And being able to figure out which locations in terms of geographics and digital out of home is awesome.
You mentioned having the right technology. What do you look for in having the right tech?
Personal bias. Because I deal with I live in the content world. So the product that I work on is a content engine. So for example, a very easy example, say a car company is trying to sell EVs, and I can go and create a model around EVs and charging stations, or whatever data points that they see as valuable. And then from there, I could create a model, and then I can see which geolocations are ingesting content that matches this model. So then from there, I could very dynamically serve digital out of home ads based off of the zip codes that are ingesting this content. And then when I look at outcomes, I could say, yeah, this digital out of home tactic that I'm running with my zip code graph is moving the needle for my client, and I want to put more in there. So think of it, if you're Fiat and you're trying to sell your electric car, and you're having trouble selling your electric car, or finding the right audience to buy your electric car, you plug in this geograph and digital out of home, and now you're hitting a lot of people at a low CPM.
So if I heard that, reading that back to you, really demand-based delivery. Hey, I'm not just going to serve my EV ads everywhere. I'm going to serve them in the geos where people are most interested in already consuming lots of content about EVs.
Exactly. Or charging stations, or solutions on how to buy EVs, right? Like EV tax breaks. You could get very custom with the model. And I always say content is king. And if you could get in front of people that are consuming the right content, then you're naturally gonna start to win, because people are engaged when they're actually reading content. And I mean, that brings up the entire can of worms of like MFA and how the industry, like chasing IDs is the wrong way to go about things. Because if you want to go down that rabbit hole, we could definitely go down that
Let's go down the rabbit hole. Let's go there so that we have it on the record.
Okay. So the way that the industry is built right now, it's very much so built for ID bombing. So if you're actually incentivized to run on crappier traffic, then run on good traffic, because there's less good quality traffic than crappy traffic. Users could be getting on sites that are bombarded with ads, 50, 60 ads on a page, probably more. They get on the site, your ad never loads. You pay for that ad because it came in at an auction. That site has a low load because it's loading so many ads. There could be stacked ads where the user literally never saw an ad. The ad could be completely out of view. There's so many ways to go about that, but you retargeted that ad from a user that was on a site. That user goes and converts because they didn't need to see an ad to go and convert. They were going to do it anyways. So you get credit for that. You get 100% credit for that blank ad that it was essentially served. And that's really how this industry is chugging along. The publishers are making supply. They're generating supply that buyers want to buy. And the buyers want to buy what gives them the lowest CPA, the highest CTR, the highest VCR. So the publishers will naturally make content for that. And they go, yeah, this is great because I can give you, I could have sites that have 50, 60 ads and I'm making more money now and people are still buying it. So it's all about how they maximize their RPMs and if the demand side still starts to buy it. And the reason why they're still buying it is because people don't understand metrics. They don't understand performance metrics really. And they're trying to feed their performance metrics in a way that doesn't really boost outcomes. It boosts platform metrics. And that's why you have this widespread industry of junk. And it's really hard on the demand side to sift through it. You have to be a good buyer within a DSP, a knowledgeable buyer to be able to sift through that crap. Like there's so much crap and there's so much manual setup on the demand side that if you're a junior buyer or someone's buying for you that's a junior buyer, you're never really going to move the mark. There's going to be a bunch of that crap inventory bought. And you might never know. And that CPA is going to look great. And you're going to keep moving. You're going to keep fueling that. And then over time, the actual client doesn't make money. And that's how CMOs get fired. That's the revolving door of the CMO. They bring in all of this stuff that they say that they're going to do. They set this up. They set their campaigns up this way. And then after a year or so, year and a half, the end client's not really making any more money, or the brand themselves isn't making any more money. And then they go, see you later. And then the next revolving door comes because people aren't really looking at outcomes when they're going and buying digital. They're saying, I'm chasing this number.
Oof. Hot take. Hot take. Like sizzling hot take. Thank you for it. I'm glad that we have it. So a follow-up question to that, and this can be for digital out of home and generally how you think about inventory. How do you qualify by format and by publisher what is good inventory to be on?
That is in the eye of the beholder, really. So a lot of it comes down to there's post-bid analytics that you can do. There's direct deals that you could set up with publishers where you say, like, I specifically want this. I want this, and I don't want you to give me anything else. So going directly to a publisher and setting up a deal. And then if you're buying on the open exchange, in some cases is fine. In a lot of cases, it's fine. It gives you massive scale, but you need to understand that you should probably have an allow list over that where you're saying, these are the domains that I'm comfortable with buying. I know that they're good quality sites, right? And then if you need to dive past that, you better have post-bid analytics going, where post-bid analytics will tell you, did you serve on MFA? Did you serve to an actual human? And then you get a report on that. And then you can go and sift through that yourself and then go and turn off or turn on whatever you think is good, what's working for you. And then you have to always check the outcome. You have directional level analytics that you have in terms of the platform metrics. You look at those, you reference those, and then you reference the outcome. And you're saying, okay, if I'm at these levels, am I doing good? So it's a constant check of everything. It's not like programmatic, and I can't even say digital out of home yet, but programmatic in terms of online video, CTV, display, native, they're a constant check. It's not a set it and forget it. You have to constantly check, because the crazy thing is, especially if you're buying on the open exchange, a reseller could get into an ads.txt file. There could be fraud that gets in, and you have no control over that. So you have to always check that stuff. It's something that you have to check daily. And that's something that I tell my team every single day. You need to check what you're serving on, where it's coming from. What do we need to do? Is there any action items that we need to do? And it's a constant check. Digital out of home currently, I buy those off direct deals. 100%, I buy digital out of home off of direct deals because I don't know.
Sure.
I don't know what's on the open exchange for digital out of home. And I don't know what is being sold or resold as digital out of home that isn't real digital out of home. So if I set up a direct deal with Atmosphere or Rockbox or Loop or something like that, I'm comfortable with that. And then I check the outcome. I still check the outcome because I want to know, am I doing everything that I can for my client? Because at the end of the day, it sounds corny. I got a big heart and I want to see people succeed. And I don't want to scam anybody. Yeah. So I want to go to bed every single night knowing I did everything that I could for my client to make sure that they're hitting their goals. If they hit their goals, I hit my goals.
I think that having a big heart is evident through your passion for this, Eric, and your willingness to share exactly what you believe. So thank you for that. What does digital out of home have to do in your mind to become a bigger part of the buy, or to be more accepted by brands as a viable channel? Is it measurement? Is it creative?
Yes.
Where do you think digital out of home can win?
There's two things that I feel. So a lot of people that buy digital out of home don't realize that they should have creative tailored for digital out of home. It shouldn't be a cinematical ad that, you have to hear it to understand what's going on. You and I had a back and forth on Twitter about this. It should be really like a story ad, right? It should be seen as more of a story ad on social where you don't need to hear it to get the message, right? A lot of the mistake that comes with buying digital out of home, I've seen it, where you look at it and you're like, that doesn't make sense because I don't know what's going on. That was a CTV ad that was repurposed for digital out of home, right? And then the second answer to the question, if I was a digital out of home provider, I would start investing in something like MMM or an alternative measurement solution. And I will tell them, if you spend with me a certain amount as an added value, I'll give you this measurement solution across and I'll measure all your stuff.
Strong.
And that would be an incentive. That would be an incentive enough for a buyer to be like, I don't have to pay $100,000 for an MMM. This is awesome. I'll go to Loop TV or Atmosphere or whatever, and they can run that for me. And they can tell me how that's working. Obviously, again, that's not a silver bullet, but that would be a nice incentive. People love incentives. There's that whole controversy where there's a bunch of kickbacks and a bunch of people are getting in trouble for kickbacks. At least this is a real, legit service that you're providing for them. It's not just a transaction, handshake, you're my buddy, here's some kickback money. You're actually adding value.
It's not a suite at the Super Bowl. It's, hey, here's how to continue driving the outcomes that matter most to your brand and bottom line.
Yeah. Let's move the needle together.
If you learn more about what you're up to, where should they go?
I'm most active on probably X. So X and LinkedIn. If you want to do something deeper, go to anuvo.com and you can find us there.
Cool. We'll link to all of that in the show notes below. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with a little bit of news. Actually, 2 great programmatic digital out of home case studies. Everybody talks about how digital out of home is growing, but nobody talks about how share of wallet is shrinking. So what that means is as overall revenue dollars go up and to the right, the actual amount that each advertiser is spending on the channel is shrinking. So it's really important that you as a publisher understand how the trends impact your business. So I want to invite you to go back and watch an episode that I call the Digital Out of Home Programmatic Primer. It's the first of a 3-part series, and the second part is coming out in 2 weeks, the Programmatic Prospectus. The third installment will be a playbook, specifically what you need to do tactically to implement the tools that will impact your business, not only in 2025, but going beyond that. So if you haven't yet watched the Programmatic Primer, it's linked at the top of the show notes. Download the slide deck that goes with the episode, share it with your sales team, share it with your executive team. It's a critical piece of information for you as a decision maker in your business. Go back and check that episode out. Now, back to the show. Welcome back. We have got 2 great programmatic digital out of home case studies. My complaint about these is that by the time the campaigns run and then they get submitted to these award shows and then the PR comes out, it's like a year after the campaign, which is the case with both of these. I'm going to see if I can, share my screen here because we've got pictures of both. And I think it would be fun to go through them. Let's just do this. We'll do this. So the first one is actually out of the UK. OVO, this energy company here, what they did was they integrated some APIs, some Gen AI, and they started with this cool idea that 42% of Brits believe that Britain only gets 10% of its electricity supply from zero and low carbon energy sources, when it's actually 55% of the energy supply. So they started with this idea of we can educate people and have fun. They used some real-time API data from the national grid, and then they overlaid this with Gen AI Creative to let people know how much energy was being used by which sources, wind, solar, etc. And what they saw in terms of impact was that more than 37,000 households signed up during the campaign period, and the company delivered more than $250,000 in credit to their customers. So pretty cool use of a live data feed and Gen AI. So Eric, the question for you, how are you thinking about unique data feeds and generative AI as levers in campaign activations going into 2025?
Yeah, so I actually was thinking about this in terms of PSAs, like with the hurricanes. So if you have situations where there's some kind of a disaster coming, and you want to get the message out quick, you can have that connection of there's extreme weather coming. Here's generative AI in terms of creative. And then let's get this message out immediately. And let's hit, our digital out of home channels. Let's hit our CTV channels. Let's hit the channels that will just get that message out like a very high quality way. That would be very, very accurate. And I think for situations like that, it would be very effective. And I think it's important to do that. A lot of people think about advertising in terms of just products, but PSAs are very important. And budgets that are PSAs, a lot of times, you talk about them when people are just like, yeah, just run it. But there's a lot of weight behind a PSA, and I think they're very important. So I think this would be awesome for that.
Really over deliver on the social good value. And it doesn't seem like overly complicated. Pretty simple stuff there.
Yeah. I mean, even something like say that there's going to be a big closure somewhere and that local government has no way of understanding how to get that message out. These are the type of channels that they can go and do that and not really disrupt the public much.
I love it. And the second one is actually a weather-based trigger. Let's share the screen again. This time it's Guinness. Guinness had a problem with being a seasonal beer down under. In Australia, they had a challenge where they weren't being bought outside of St. Patrick's Day. So they kind of went to the drawing board. They just won a drum award for this campaign. So what they did was the master brewers in Ireland actually suggested the ideal temperature of Guinness barrels for the perfect pour, fun fact, is between 5 and 7 degrees Celsius, which is about 40 degrees to 45 degrees Fahrenheit. So those are the average winter temperatures in Australia, and winter weather can be somewhat unpredictable. So what Guinness did was they used digital out of home to activate programmatically whenever the weather was between 5 and 7 degrees Celsius. And they did this in 4 different cities, 21 different creative variations. They were delivering on small format screens within 1 kilometer of pubs serving Guinness, and they offered a free pint whenever the temperature dropped below 7 degrees. What they saw, 2,000 Guinness beer vouchers redeemed during that period, 13% year-over-year increase in winter beer consumption, an additional 100,000 pints consumed, resulting in an 18% revenue increase. Eric, to your point, that's outcomes. Awesome. What probably started as a fun way to solve a hard problem turned into real outcome.
Yeah. That's exactly why you go beyond what you can attribute. There's no way that they would have tracked that. It was still bought digitally and it added massive value.
That's it. I think that we've done a pretty good job of at least challenging some of the status quo today, Eric, thinking more about outcomes, thinking holistically, being able to do fun, creative things like this, like weather triggers and different APIs and data feeds that we can plug into the greatest broadcast channel available to us, digital out of home. Eric, thank you.
Yeah, definitely. It was fun.
Absolutely. Any parting thoughts or parting words for us as we sign off here?
So we talked about this a little offline, but I'm kind of a film buff. The rise of the revolution is starting to take place in ad tech. The Great Awakening period, it's slowly happening. You're slowly starting to see people catch on. And the only way to do that is to have more people have this conversation. I started getting active on social media like 2.5 months ago. I have a couple thousand followers now. So, and I'm just a guy, right? And I'm starting to build a platform now. So I think if I can do it, anyone can do it.
Absolutely. That was actually the footnote I had on our notes for today's conversation was I had 1984 Apple commercial was kind of the theme to the underlying tone, as it were. So Eric, personified here in the flesh, the rebellion is here. Thank you.
Yeah,
absolutely. If you found this episode to be helpful, please share it with someone who could benefit. As always, make sure to smash that subscribe button. Wherever you're listening, leave the podcast review. That's how you help us grow. We'll see y'all next time.